Today, I'm going to be showing you guys how to tie one of the most prominent flies in my box that gets used in all sorts of situations all over the country, all over the world, which is the CDC France fly. So the France fly itself has been really popular in competitive fly fishing circles for well over a decade. It was invented at a Youth World Fly Fishing Championships by a youth angler at the time. I cannot remember his name, and I will put in the comments when I find it out. I have some texts out asking people to remind me of it because he should get credit for creating such a great fly. The original version of the France fly utilized a clear vinyl stretch tubing over a colored thread so that you could change the body color simply by changing the thread color. Now, most people these days are tying it with a colored stretch tubing. So personally, I mainly use black and olive. So I'm using the black and or olive vinyl stretch tubing from Wapsi in the micro size. Whether you're doing it clear or colored stretch tubing, the micro size is the best for building a smooth body. Let's get into actually tying our CDC France. So, like a lot of my nymphs, I'm going to be tying this on a dry fly hook. This is a Phasma 100 BL silk I've been testing out for a couple months here, and it's done me pretty well for my nymphs. My normal go-to is a Doohickey 301, so that's what a lot of the nymphs in my competition go box are tied on. So I like the dry fly hooks. I've said this in a few other videos, because the thinner wire is going to make it a little bit easier for that hook to penetrate the trout's mouth. So your hookup ratio goes up a little bit. Overall, I do find the dry fly hooks do add an extra fish or two at the end of the day. Just my personal experience, personal observations. But if you don't want to use dries, you can do a standard jig hook, standard nymph hook, whatever floats your boat, as long as it's a comparable size. I like these in everything from a 14 to a 20. Usually I'm fishing 16s and 18s though. I think this is a perfect size 16 fly. It just really looks good and fishes good in that size. But to go to kind of those extreme ends, it's got to be a pretty specific situation. So we're going to be pairing this today with a 2-3 tungsten slotted bead from my friend Devin's site, Tactical Fly Fisher. And these are awesome beads, but I will go anywhere from a 2.0 all the way to a 4.0 on this same size 16, depending on the situation. Get that bead on there, get the hook in the vise, and then we're going to start by just getting our thread started right behind the bead with a couple nice wraps. And we're just going to break this tag off. Next, we're going to grab a piece of this micro tubing. So like I was saying earlier, this is the Wapsi black vinyl stretch tubing in the micro size. The micro size is 100% the best for this fly. It's going to create the smoothest body. I'm going to grab that, and I'm just going to sit this bead up so that the long side of the slot is on top of the hook, and the majority of this bead is sitting on the top of the shank. And in the little bit of slot that's visible there, I'm just going to stick this micro tubing in there, and I'm going to secure it with a couple wraps. Going to make sure it's situated perfectly on top of the shank. I'm going to do a few more wraps to lock it in. And I want that bead sitting in that position for two reasons. One is to open up this hook gap a little bit. So the less tungsten that's sitting below the eye, the more that hook point is exposed, the better the chance a fish has to actually find that and get hooked. And then two, with the weight sitting on top of the shank, you're going to get a little bit of an inversion similar to how you'd get with a jig hook, but with a straight shank hook. Once I get that wrapped on, I'm going to wrap it down to about half the shank with no tension. Then I'm going to pull that micro tubing back to thin it out a little bit, and that's just going to help build up this taper a touch. Once I get it all the way back to the bend here, I'm going to wrap this thread up the bead, and then we're going to wrap it back down about a third of the way to the bend, back up to the bead, then back down about a third of the way from the bead, and then back up to the bead. And that's just also going to help build this really fine kind of micro taper to this fly. Once I got that done, I'm going to start wrapping this micro tubing up. So when I'm starting out here, I'm going to pull pretty hard just to thin that out a little bit. I'm going to make these just barely touching wraps up the shank so I get a smooth body. And when I get about halfway, I'm going to ease off the tension a bit. I'm going to make these wraps a little bit more overlapping. Again, just to help build up that taper. When I get to the bead, I'm just going to tie it down with a few wraps. Wrap in front. Then I'm going to pull this pretty tight. And we're going to cut it here. And that's going to make it kind of snap back when you cut it so it's really flush with the shank here. Now at this point we're ready for our CDC. So I prefer to get my CDC in unmarked bags from a friend in the Czech Republic. It's not shady at all, but it is the best stuff on the market. So if you can get your hands on some Czech CDC, I would highly recommend it. If not, your locally produced ducks will suffice. And I'm just going to comb that back, get some of the fibers. This is natural, unwashed, undyed mallard CDC. I prefer unwashed and undyed because I find that the washing and dyeing process stiffens the fibers up a little bit, makes them flow a little less in the water, and I like as much natural movement as I can get out of my flies, so I always just go for the standard stuff. And we're just going to go ahead, pull some of those fibers back, and then clamp them with this CDC clamp here. So notice that I didn't take the entire feather. This is just somewhere between a 1/4 and a 1/2 inch worth of fibers here. You don't want these flies to be super dense. Remember, you're not floating a dry fly, you're just adding a little bit of movement to the nymph. When I get those fibers in there, squeeze the CDC clamp pretty tight, and then I just brush out any tiny little fibers that are just going to add bulk and not really contribute to the movement. So this helps keep the fly a little bit slimmer. We're just going to set that aside for a second, and we're going to grab our thread, spin it counterclockwise just a little bit, just to help open up those fibers. You don't want to overspin it or else you're going to retwist it in the opposite direction, but you want these fibers to be kind of flat so it's easier to split the thread, which is how we're going to attach these fibers to the fly. So they make some fancy tools for splitting the thread. I prefer to just run the thread over my pointer finger, ease up on the tension a little bit, and then just come in with another fly or a bare hook and run that backward over the thread until the hook point is somewhere in the middle there, and then bring it forward to get in between the fibers. And then I just grab one side and open it up, and then I stick my pointer finger in there to keep it separated. So we have a nice split thread there. I'm going to come in with our clamp, and we're just going to put those fibers butt first into the thread and remove our pointer finger so it can clamp down. And then I'm just going to open the clamp really fast and then remove it. You don't want to kind of start pulling it as you open, because then you run the chance of pulling the fibers out or misaligning them. So you want to open quick and then pull out slow. If you get a little bit too much butt sticking out here, remember, we don't want to build a lot of bulk near the head, we just want these fibers for movement. So you want these kind of tips, the butt, to be as flush to the thread as possible. So if I don't do it perfectly with a clamp and align it so that there's a minimal amount sticking out, I'll just spin the thread until they kind of come back to that straight position. And I'll just, with my scissors, come clip the very edges off. And that gives you a nice low profile CDC brush. So then I'm going to pinch the thread right below the CDC feathers, and we're just going to spin my bobbin clockwise now to retwist those fibers in the right direction, in the tying direction, and gonna let it spin for a while, let go. Sometimes I'll do it twice just to get them clamped in there extra hard. And then I'm just gonna start wrapping. Once I get the feathers touching the hook shank here, I'm going to brush back to align all those fibers pointing to the back of the hook. And I'm gonna brush back every little bit of rotation I go around that hook shank, just to make sure they all stay aligned the right way. And like I said, I don't want to add too much bulk, so I do one full rotation around the shank with feathers, and then anything I have left over, I just go ahead and I pull out. So you can just pull them out of the thread there. Then I make sure those feathers are all aligned, come in with 2 or 3 more wraps right behind the bead, and then you're ready to whip finish. So grab your whip finish and just come in here with 5 wraps. I'm going to pull it tight, but not so tight that I break the thread. Put some tension on it, and then come in with the scissors here. And so when I come in with my scissors, I'm not going to come in and chop, because run the risk of cutting some of these fibers off. I'm going to make a little V with the points, put tension on this thread, push the scissors close to the fly, and then I'm just going to slowly slide up a little bit. And that's going to cut the thread without cutting any of that CDC. We're basically done with our fly here. There's just one more thing to do, and that is trim these fibers up. So we don't want these fibers sticking way, way off the back of the fly, making it look bigger than it actually is. We want them basically lined up with the bend of the hook. So when you're going to trim CDC or marabou or any fine fibered feather, you never want to cut it, because that's going to make it look really squared off and unnatural. What you're going to do is you're going to pinch it to about the length you want it at, and then with your other hand, your thumb and pointer finger, you're just going to get in there, squeeze, and pull perpendicular. And that's going to tear them off. It's going to make them irregular and uneven so that they look kind of nicely tapered, but it's going to align them to about the length you want. And there you go. That's your CDC France fly. Another super simple fly. You can tie it in a couple seconds, and it's going to catch a whole bunch of fish when the time is right. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and as always, if you did, be sure to like and subscribe.